play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Not live from Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for listening. Whether you're listening to the broadcast on Saturday at 1 p.m. Central on 99.5 Faith Talk, which is a temporary station change. I believe that this is the last weekend for that, actually, because this should be, I'm pre-recording with my guest, who I'll introduce here in a moment, but this show should air November 11th, which will be the last weekend of the station change. So if you're hearing this on 99.5 Faith Talk on Saturday at 1 p.m. and you're like, hey, what the heck is Shane Plays Geek Talk? Well, one, I hope you enjoy it. But two, if you want to keep listening to the show, starting next weekend, we'll be back on our home station of 96.5 FM, The Answer, at 1 p.m. And during this time, we are replaying the show on 96.5 FM on Sunday nights, so at 5 p.m. So thanks so much to Salem. It's great home to be on right here in Little Rock with the Shane Plays Geek Talk, geek-centric talk radio show. So normally I would give out the call-in number. I'm not going to do that because we're not live. And then, you can always tweet me your thoughts and stuff on the show at Shane Plays, ShanePlays. The show notes and links once the podcast goes out and the Krypton radio version goes out, will be up at shaneplays.com. And then last week's show and previous shows are archived on the blog. And I love radio, and normally I do live radio. I love the energy of live radio, but we also go as a podcast because I love the podcast format too. So, and sometimes I'll tweak it a little bit for the podcast, add something a little fun on the end or something like that. But the podcast goes out at the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, and more, including I put the show on YouTube. And last but never least, Shane Plays is carried on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is SyFy for your Wi-Fi. KryptonRadio.com. Introducing my guest, professional comics writer, Tony Isabella. Tony, welcome to Shane Plays.
Hi, Shane. Thanks for having me.
Man, I'm so glad to have you, and I want to give it a shout out to my friend Bill Brackeen for making the introduction and helping coordinate this interview. I was telling Tony before the show started, I have a lot of different kinds of content on the show, anything geeky, and it goes, games, comic books, movies, what have you. But it's always a special treat for me when I get to talk to comic book professionals, because probably my first really deep geek love was and remains comic books, with role-playing games being a very close second. So this is always a treat for me. I'm sure Tony just sees himself as I would guess, just a guy doing my job but for me, this is like, big treat to talk to guys who's helped shape what comic books are. So, and we'll talk about this more in the show. But what one of the things that Tony is best known for, of course, is the character of Black Lightning, who as our news segment will show, has two interesting and exciting projects around that character coming soon. So, Tony, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself before I start the news segment?
I've been a comics professional for 45 years. I started out working for Marvel Comics, working with Stan Lee and Roy Thomas and Sal Brodsky, putting out British weekly comic books that were produced in America but published in Great Britain. Once you're on staff at Marvel, because the staff pay, especially in 1972, was pretty bad, you would start doing freelance. I'd always wanted to write comics, so as opportunities came along, I took them. I worked in New York at Marvel for a few years, switched over to DC Comics for about 6 months, and then moved back to Ohio, which is where I've been ever since.
All right, and you're still active in the industry. Excellent. Okay. Well, I've got a segment later in the show that's going to be things you might not know about comic book writer Tony Isabella. What we're going to do before that, though, is we're going to have a quick news segment. Steve, hit us up with the super secret microphone in the news team room. Yep, there they go, working hard. On a Saturday, because we are pre-recording on a Saturday. We're pre-recording this immediately after a live show, which I don't know if I've ever done that before. So I'm doing double duty today. And Steve, say hi, Steve. Oh, I've got the mic. Okay. Yeah, we had to, due to the magic of editing, people don't know, we just had some weird problem where I had to come in here in the engineer's booth because I couldn't hear anything in the studio right in the middle of talking to Tony. Anyway, so folks, just want to remind everybody, for every $1 of support the Patreon account gets, the news team gets a penny an hour raise. So it's a win-win for everybody. Sal in his fedora, and he's always chomping on an unlit cigar. He's in there working hard with that news team and keeping everything in order. And Sal's grandmother and her dog Muffin love when I joke around with Zach, when I banter, if you will, with Zach, and she gets upset when she doesn't hear Zach. So I'm gonna get a sternly written note from Sal's grandmother and her dog Muffin. But Zach will be back, I guess, starting November 18th. So, but Steve, I really appreciate all the help you do during the football change. So, okay, so first in the news, and this is really exciting, and this is one of the main reasons why we're talking with Tony today, is Black Lightning creator, who would be Tony Isabella, is returning for a comic book series with Black Lightning called Cold Dead Hands. And that is courtesy CBR.com. And the lead line on this article is Black Lightning is back and he's bringing an old friend with him. Tony Isabella, the original creator, Black Lightning, that's right, the original creator of Black Lightning, returns to the character with Black Lightning Cold Dead Hands. This 6-issue series, but as Tony will tell you, he plans to keep going with Black Lightning, and it's going to have art with Clayton Henry of Harbinger fame. Will explore the life of a younger Jefferson Pierce. So I wanted to ask you about this real quick, Tony. Is this, with everything DC's been doing with Rebirth, where will we find Jefferson Pierce at in your comic? Is this a different version of Jefferson Pierce, or how would you best describe it?
Yes and no.
Okay.
See, we're not really part of Rebirth, but when DC asked me if I would, write Black Lightning again, and my question to them was, what Black Lightning do you want me to write? Because I've written them twice before. Other people have written them. There was a new 52 version written by someone else, and they said, you can do whatever you want. So I decided to largely discard 40 years of continuity, and he's not starting over per se. As we need them in the story, you'll get more background details, but basically he's 28 years old, younger than I've ever written him. He has never been married. He is a school teacher at a Cleveland high school because we've moved his adventures to Cleveland, Ohio, my hometown. It's the DC Universe version of Cleveland, Ohio, but it bears a lot of resemblance to the real Cleveland, Ohio. He has a real family, which he's never had before. In fact, the reason he's back in Cleveland is that he and his recently deceased father moved back to Cleveland so his dad could spend his final years among his old friends and family. He is, to my mind, smarter than other versions of Black Lightning I've written because he really thinks through his powers, how to use them, and the situations around him. He is, as ever, the core values are still there. Jefferson Pierce is a reluctant hero. Given his druthers, he would be a teacher, and that is his true passion. But because he's a responsible human being, a man of faith, he has these powers, and he knows he must use them for his community. So he becomes Black Lightning when the need arises. Now, as the series opens, he has not been operating as Black Lightning for a couple of years while he's been taking care of his father.
Okay. All right. Well, that's and when do you think that the first issue is going to ship? Do y'all have is it being
Wednesday,
solicited yet?
November 1st.
Oh.
So by the time this airs,
Perfect.
your listeners will be able to run out to their comic book shop and get Black Lightning Cold Dead Hands #1.
All right, excellent. So, okay, and that is the Cold Dead Hands series with Black Lightning. Now, one other question I wanted to ask you. I know at different times, and if you just answered this, I apologize, but I don't think I heard that in there. Was at different times his powers have either been as a result of like an apparatus, and I think at other times maybe it was more, inborn. Like what fuels this particular Black Light, or is that part?
Jefferson Pierce is a metahuman. His
Okay.
powers are natural. He does have a suit he wears. There are aspects of the suit that allow him to use his powers in somewhat different ways, but his powers are natural, and that's how we're playing them. These are his natural powers. He's just learned some new ways to use them. Excellent.
Okay. Well, cool. And then also very exciting, this news story is courtesy SciFi Wire, and this has actually been out for a while. I know I've featured a similar story on the show before during a news segment, but the CW has picked up DC's Black Lightning to be a TV series. So and it's going to, I guess it's, they just say something about the sometime like mid 2017, 2018 season. Do you have any insight on when?
Well, it's not. There's not a firm start date yet. It's mid-season, which could be anywhere from January to April. I know that the series is being filmed right now in Atlanta. Exactly when it starts airing probably depends on any number of factors. Does some other CW show get weak and they feel the need to replace it sooner than mid-season?
Okay.
So all that's up in the air.
And this show has an older Jefferson Pierce basically coming out of retirement. And I think he has a couple of daughters. And one of the hallmarks of Black Lightning, has been a lot of times he protects areas of the city that maybe other superheroes don't care about, or he's protecting his own turf, his own neighborhood. So the sense I get is that his daughters, due to, I guess, things going on in his neighborhood, come into danger. So he comes out of retirement, and he's older. I guess he's middle-aged, which I think is actually kind of cool, because so many of the, the superhero TV shows that are on right now feature, younger, hip kind of heroes for the most part. So I'm actually kind of intrigued that they went that way with this series. Now, did you personally have any involvement? Did they consult you? Do you have any involvement with this TV show?
Well, when DC first contacted me, reached out to me to see if we could work together again, see if we could work out some past problems. And early on, because DC's got new management now, Jeff Johns, Dan DiDio, Jim Lee.
Right.
And early on, I knew this is going to work. We're going to figure out a fair agreement, and I'm going to be working with DC again. The first thing DC asked me to do before we had even signed any contracts or anything was to write a paper called Black Lightning's Core Values. What are the core values of the character? That's the starting point for my comic series. That's the starting point for the TV series. Then when Salim and Mara Brock-Akil were brought in as showrunners for the new Black Lightning show, we had conference calls in which they asked me tons of questions, and we had this whole mutual admiration society thing going. And I said then that I was available at any time that the show needed me. And I don't have an official role with the show. Unofficially, I guess I'm head cheerleader.
Okay.
But they flew me out to Burbank to talk to the writers of the show, which was an incredible experience that I can't give away too many details on. But walk into the writer's room, and on one wall is a big whiteboard where they roughly roughed out the first season of 13 episodes, and you see how much of you is in there. And then on the other wall, they have character drawings, character photos of the actors they've already cast, and a list of names. And a whole bunch of those are characters I created. And then you sit down with the writers, and they ask you questions about comics you wrote 40 years ago, and you realize they've not just read your comics, they have studied them. And their questions were great. There's a lot of me in this TV series, but there's an awful lot of this very talented group of writers and producers. And Cress Williams, who plays Jefferson Pierce, is just a wonderful actor. He's something of a comics fan, so he and I have been corresponding. I love his take on Jefferson Pierce. I am excited for this show. All of the DC CW shows are enjoyable. They're edgy in a fantasy sense. The Black Lightning TV series is edgy in a real-world sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looked a little... I kind of got that sense from the preview stuff I've seen. So,
well, they filmed about a 20-minute presentation to sell the show to the CW, and the trailer was taken from that. But I've seen, because I was there in the writers' room, I've now seen the entire presentation piece, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's everything I could have hoped for. I love the actresses playing his daughters. I love the actress playing his ex-wife, Lynn. It's just, I couldn't be prouder of my creation coming to TV in such a great way.
Oh, excellent. So I'm curious. So when they brought you out to meet with the creators and et cetera, and they were asking about your stuff you read 40 years ago, where you're like I don't remember, or did you remember the stuff they were asking about?
I have a pretty good memory for Black Lightning. There's other things I've written that I don't remember as well. A lot of times at a comic book convention, somebody will bring me something to sign, and it takes me a little bit to remember that, oh, yeah, I did write that. But no, Black Lightning is near and dear to my heart. As I've told people countless times, I would be thrilled to write Black Lightning up to my dying day.
All right. So I guess we could say that maybe this is your favorite character?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, excellent. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut to a break. We come back, we're going to talk about some things you might not know about comic book writer Tony Isabella. And then later in the show, I want to get into, what led Tony to create Black Lightning. Why is Black Lightning so important to him? When we come back, right here on Shane Plays Geek Talk on our temporary station. Last weekend we're doing this of this year for the footballs, 99.5 Faith Talk. We will be back. Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
The die is cast.
Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Troll Lord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions. Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local
game store or Trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/Shane Plays.
And we're back on Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into things we love. Our temporary station last weekend for this year due to Ouachita Baptist football, we are on 99.5 Faith Talk, and then we'll replay tomorrow night on our Sunday night on our normal home station of 96.5 FM The Answer. Our guest is professional comics writer Tony Isabella, who is best known for the character of Black Lightning, but has a career much more extensive than that. And as we were talking before the break, that there's a lot of exciting stuff happening with that character right now. One, there's a comic book series dropping that, or by the time this airs, will have dropped on November 1st, the first issue, and it's Black Lightning, Cold Dead Hands, and that's a kind of a not a reset, a slightly different take on Jefferson Pierce, but it's all good because he's safe in the hands of his original creator, Tony Isabella. And then also soon, sometime early next year, we should have a Black Lightning TV show on the CW. So, which is also very exciting. Now, one thing I've heard, Tony, on the TV show, from what I understand, it does not connect in with the rest of what is called the Arrowverse. Do you know if that's correct?
To the best of my knowledge, we're being coy about that.
Okay.
They don't explicitly say that it's part of the Arrowverse. They don't explicitly say it's not part of the Arrowverse. But in any case, that's not a question to be answered in the first season.
Gotcha.
The first season seems to be a self-contained 13-episode story. So I don't, again, I'm not in there day to day. It doesn't look to me like it's going to cross over with the Arrowverse in its first season.
Okay.
Beyond that, who knows? But I think they don't make that call explicitly.
All right.
Which leaves them room to either say, no, it's not part of it, or yes, it is.
Well, I know that the first season of Supergirl wasn't because they were on CBS, but then when they moved over to the CW, she visits the Arrowverse, on an alternate, universe or whatever. So, okay, well, let's get on this. I've got a thing here. I'm calling it Things You Might Not Know About Comic Book Writer Tony Isabella. And the reason I'm calling it that is because as I was researching to talk with you, Tony, I was like, I didn't know these things. So I thought that was a good name to call it. Now, this is on Wikipedia. So as you said before the show, we're like, let's hope it's all accurate. So feel free to correct anything, that isn't right or whatever. But now Wikipedia has your notable works as Black Goliath, Black Lightning, and the Justice Machine. And I guess you did a Tony's Tips column in the Comic Buyer's Guide for several years?
And actually, I still do that column.
Oh, do you?
At
Okay.
salesofwonder.com.
Ah,
which
okay.
is sponsored by In Stock Trades.
Well, great. And so what kind of things can people find at Tony's Tips?
It's reviews.
Okay.
It's reviews of comic books, graphic novels, occasionally movies and TV shows. I try to present a trio of interesting items every week. There are occasional weeks when we don't review stuff, and instead I might do a thought piece like comic book collections that we don't have that we should have, things like that. But for the most part, it's a pretty solid, 3 reviews a week format.
Okay.
And I review all sorts of stuff. American comics, European graphic novels, Japanese manga. I've reviewed Phantom Comics from Australia. I'm free to review whatever I want, and I do.
Nice. Okay. Go check that out. And what was that URL again? It was something of wonder.com.
It's salesofwonder.com, and it's sponsored by In Stock Trades.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I'll go check that out, and I encourage my listeners to do so as well. So,
in addition to that, I should mention that on a daily basis, when I'm not jammed up with deadlines or convention appearances, I also write Tony Isabella's Bloggy thing, which is everything that interests me, be it comics, cheesy monster movies, real life, politics, whatever I feel like writing about. And if your listeners Google Tony Isabella, they will find out I am the poster child for online excess.
Okay. All right. I love it. So I'm a big fan of cheesy and or bad monster movies myself. What's the last good cheesy monster movie you can remember watching?
Well, I watched so many of them, it's hard to come up with the most recent one. That's a tough question. Because a lot of them tend to blur together. But I will say that every year my son and I go to G-Fest, which is the big Godzilla convention in Chicago. And I am pastor of a Facebook page called the First Church of Godzilla. And so the Godzilla movies are very big with me. The recent Japanese film, Shin Godzilla. I love Sharknado and the silly movies that come out of my friends at the Asylum.
Yeah.
Last year they had a movie called Ozark Shark, which I think they've renamed. But every year they do like 3 or 4 shark movies to show the same week as Sharknado. And a lot of those have strong women characters. And I really get a kick out of those.
Okay, so let me rein this back in we learned definitely something that we didn't know about Tony. And I'm going to go, is that an open Facebook group that people can join?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'm going to join that because I love me some Godzilla or Gojira, wherever you want to call him. So, First Church. Steve, what do you think? Are you going to go join the First Church of Godzilla? Steve's nodding. All right. So, getting back to some of your, you started your comics career. You started, it looks like Roy Thomas hired you originally in 1972. So, right. You worked with some of the Marvel UK's stuff when it was first starting. And then you also served as an editor for Marvel's Black and White magazine line. Now, as a writer, it has you as Ghost Rider, It the Living Colossus, Luke Cage in Hero for Hire, Tigra, Marvel Chillers, Daredevil, Captain America. And then I didn't know this either, while writing Iron Fist in Marvel Premiere, you co-created the supporting character of Misty Knight. I didn't know that.
Correct.
And if I understand right, Misty Knight is in the Netflix Marvel TV shows.
Yeah. He's in the Luke Cage series, and in fact, Marvel flew artist Arvel Jones and I to New York for the premiere of the series at the Magic Johnson Theater in Harlem. So we were there on the red carpet with the actors and producers and writers of Luke Cage and had a great evening. Arvel and I there's photos on my blog of Arvel and I with Simone Messick, who does such a wonderful job portraying Misty Knight. In fact, I like Simone's take on Misty Knight better than any of the comic book versions, including the one I wrote.
Wow. That's pretty big praise.
And Marvel has continued to, Marvel and DC are both treating me pretty well these days. Arvel and I also were flown up to New York to see a special screening of The Defenders before it launched on Netflix.
That's nice.
Misty's in that series too.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, one of the things that I've been impressed with the TV shows, especially the Netflix Marvel stuff, is some of the characters. Instead of just trying to invent all new characters, they're bringing in like the Night Nurse. I mean, who would have seen that coming?
Yeah.
That they brought the Night Nurse in. So anyway, all right. So one thing I wanted to point out here, just personally to you, looks like you wrote the Shadow War of Hawkman series in '85. Yeah. That was one of my favorite miniseries. I mean, I read that thing over and over and over again, and I really enjoyed it. That was the series that got me into Hawkman and got me enjoying Hawkman. And I still, to this day, can see clear as a bell that scene you wrote, because they were killing anybody that was Hawkman related, right?
Well, they were killing anybody who might be a threat to them.
Right. And you had that scene where that kid just discovered that he had wings as powers. Just discovered, and he's out, he's not even a superhero. He's just flying around, enjoying what it feels like to fly. And he just, they just shoot him out of the sky. And that's always stuck with me, that scene that you wrote. So
here's something you don't know about Tony Isabella.
Okay.
That character, Eddie Hamilton, named after Edmund Hamilton, who wrote the classic story, He Who Hath Wings. It was never my intention to kill Eddie Hamilton. He wasn't dead. He looked dead.
Oh, he looked very dead. Yeah.
And I would have brought him back had I stayed on the series. If I had not had editorial disagreements with Denny O'Neil, who wanted to upend the 5-year plan I had for the book that had already been approved by the previous editor, you would have seen that character back.
Oh, that makes me feel good, because I always felt bad for that kid. Here he is flying around, and he's
Artist Richard Howell, I somehow neglected to tell him that character wasn't really dead. And Richard just found out recently from talking to me that I'd always intended to bring the character back.
Yeah, because he did not look alive to me, but it's comics. So, we can always bring them back. So, all right. And then one thing I wanted to ask you about, and this really caught my attention. It says here in the Wikipedia entry, it says, during your run on Ghost Rider, it said you wrote a 2-year story arc in which Johnny Blaze, who was the Ghost Rider at the time, encountered an unnamed character referred to as the Friend, who helped Blaze stay protected from Satan. So you basically are quoted as saying that he looked like a hippie Jesus Christ, and that's exactly who he was, though you never actually called him that. It allowed you to address a disparity that had long bothered you about the Marvel Universe, though you had no end of hells and Satan surrogates. We had really nothing of heaven or Christ figures. So that really spoke to me, because I agree with you that there's not a lot of that. And then you shared with me that, originally the way things ended were not how you intended that to end. So did you want to share how that was originally supposed to end? Yeah.
In the final issue of Ghost Rider that I wrote, Johnny Blaze, he looks like he's had it. He looks like Satan's going to claim him. And in Marvel speak, because I didn't want to be explicit about it, Johnny Blaze accepts Christ. Now, I am not a person of faith myself, but I admire people of faith who manage to practice their faith without bigotry. And I feel that since we have people of faith reading our comics, that they should see themselves represented. So in Marvel speak, Johnny Blaze accepts Jesus as a savior. Satan will have no more power over him. And at that point on, had I continued on the book, you wouldn't have seen Jesus, you wouldn't have seen Satan in the book anymore. What you would have seen is Johnny Blaze as more of a white hat hero, having superhero adventures in Hollywood, getting married, raising a family, helping troubled members of the Hollywood community, going to church every now and then, which is something I show Black Lightning doing. And again, it's because my definition of diversity, I'm known for writing characters of color, but my definition of diversity has expanded. And my feeling right now is if we have readers reading our comic books, black or white, gay or straight, religious or atheist, Republican or Democrat, whatever, they deserve to see themselves reflected in our comic books. Not everybody in one issue, because there wouldn't be room for a story, but they should be able to find themselves in these comics. One of my favorite comics right now is Marvel's Ms. Mystic, which stars a young Muslim Pakistani American girl, Kala Khan, as a superhero, and they're delightful stories written by American Muslim G. Willow Wilson. And this Ms. Marvel character is a good kid. She's a true hero. She wants to help people. and I just love reading that comic book. It's probably my favorite Marvel comic right now.
I appreciate your approach on that, because it seems like, what will happen is there'll be kind of a fashionable trend come along, like we need more of this kind of character, and then all of a sudden you see sort of a lopsided push for just that one type of character. And I appreciate your approach is like we should represent everybody who's reading the comics.
Well, that's kind of, the idea that company decrees come down and say we need more characters of this type. I've never experienced that. What I've seen is that when you see diverse characters, it's generally because the writers, and in some cases editors, wanted to do diverse characters, not that there was any edict from above saying that we had to do this. Nobody's ever told me, we need more women characters, we need more gay characters, we need more black characters. Nobody's ever told me that. That came from my own desire to see different faces in the comics. And these days, of course, because the industry has grown, we're seeing a diversity among the writers and artists and editors as well. And I think that makes for great storytelling, for different types of storytelling. But this is a movement that started in the 70s, and it was because this new generation, including myself, were coming in, and we wanted to see our comics reflect the real world more closely. Right,
which will lead into, and we'll get this after our next break, which leads directly into characters like Black Lightning and their background and, where they came from. One other thing here I wanted to mention was that you also, I guess you did some work with Comico on Justice Machine and...
Comico.
Yeah, Comico. Is that? I've always said Comico. Yeah. So you got... I guess you picked up after the Bill Willingham limited series. Right. So what was that like working? Because at the time you're Marvel, DC, and then you start working for Comico, which is a much smaller, publishing company. So was there a big difference, or was it all about the same for you?
By that time in my career, people pretty much let me do what I wanted. That was the case with the creator of the Justice Machine, Mike Gustovich. Wanted to bring me aboard as writer. He was from Ohio, too. Initially, Mike and I would co-plot the stories together. I wouldn't actually write a plot out for him. We would just talk. With the first 3 issues, we just talked out. And then after that, I started doing a more detailed plot for him. I enjoyed it. The background of the series never really made a whole lot of sense to me. I worked with it as best I could. I think I did some good work on it. But I have to say, it's never been one of my favorite credits.
Okay.
I think I did a good job on it. I know people enjoyed it because they bring me lots of copies of it to sell. But it's not up there among my favorites.
Okay. Final question before the break. Is there a character that you've always wanted to work on, but just for whatever reason you've never been able to? Like if you had other than Black Lightning, who I know is your favorite, do you have a dream character you'd like to?
So more than I could recount. Everything from Cosmo the Merry Martian, who appeared in 7 issues of his own title from Archie Comics in the 50s, to my take on Batman, my take on Superman. I've never written a Misty Knight series. I would love to do that. There's just so many great characters out there that I would love to write that to narrow it down to just one would be difficult for me.
All right. Fair enough. Okay. Well, I'm going to take us to a break. When we get back, I want to talk a little bit about, why did you create Black Lightning? Why was creating that character, important for you? And maybe, I'll just ask you this one now so I don't forget. Has the longevity and the popularity of Black Lightning surprised you?
No, not at all.
Okay.
When I created this character, I felt that he belonged in the top tier of DC characters right next to Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. The previous management of DC didn't have the respect for me or the character that the current management has.
All right.
So it has been 40 years, but I think Black Lightning is just now really coming into his own.
Interesting. Yeah, some characters do that. Decades later, they really explode. So, and one thing I forgot to, you talking about management, one thing I forgot to clarify, we were talking about your intention with Ghost Rider and that character of the friend who was a Jesus Christ character, that the editors, I guess, rewrote it or forced it to be that.
One assistant editor, Jim Shooter, took it upon himself to change the story because it offended him.
Right.
My three editors on the book, Roy Thomas, Len Wein, and Marv Wolfman, had all approved my plans for the character.
Right. But Jim Shooter changed it for some reason to where the Christ figure turned out to be a demon in disguise, which is about as much of a 180 as you can do on where a story is supposed to go. But anyway, that's go ahead.
I related to Johnny Blaze, and apparently Jim Shooter related to some other characters in the book.
And we'll just let that hang in the air, and people can make their own assumptions. Okay, I'm going to throw some love at a sponsor, and then we're going to go to a break, and we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about Black Lightning specifically. So some goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. Conveniently located 1121 South Bowman, right on the corner of Bowman and Canis in West Little Rock, and staffed by friendly employees, Game Goblins has expanded their store size, and there's plenty of room for exciting inventory and tables for play space. You'll like that space because Game Goblins has gaming events every day of the week. For all your gaming needs, I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers, mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. Tell them Shane Plays sent you. And we're back on Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into things we love. We're talking with comics professional, writer, and columnist, and all kind, and also the pastor of the First Church of Godzilla, Tony Isabella. Go check out the First Church of Godzilla on Facebook if you don't believe me. Go check it out. So we've got Tony Isabella. We're talking about his comics career. Learned a lot of things that we didn't know about Tony Isabella before this break. But what I want to talk about now, in the remaining time we have, is Black Lightning, the character himself, which is Tony's creation. It's his favorite character to write. It's very, very important, not only in comics, but it sounds like for Tony himself. Now, is it true that now was Black Lightning the first African-American character in mainstream comics? Is that? Oh,
no. There were other characters before that. Black Lightning was DC Comics' first headlining.
Okay. I knew it was something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
So did he come, when Black Lightning first came on the scene, what did he come out the gate in his own series, or was he? Okay, yeah. So that's a pretty big deal.
I should give you here's the short version of the origin of Black Lightning.
Okay.
When I was a kid growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, which was a very segregated city, my first three black friends were comic book fans, and even then, I felt that it was unfair that there weren't more black characters. At that point, I think we had Black Panther. I don't even think Luke Cage had come along. So when I got into comics, I knew I wanted to work on characters of color. And I did at Marvel. I wrote Luke Cage. I wrote the Falcon and a couple of issues of Captain America. I took Bill Foster, a supporting character, and turned him into Black Goliath. And I wrote the Living Mummy, who was black, but nobody knew because he was all wrapped in bandages.
You snuck one in there.
And I liked these characters a lot, but they just didn't seem to be my character. I love Luke Cage. He was an ex-con, unjustly or not. I love the Black Panther, but he was an African king. Black Goliath was closer to what I wanted because he was a scientist, but again, not exactly what I wanted. When I came to DC Comics, they wanted me to write a book that had already been created but not published. Two scripts had been written of a character called the Black Bomber. And the Black Bomber was a white racist who took part in camouflage experiments to help him blend into the jungles of Vietnam better. He did not know. Nothing happened to him until he came home. And then when he would come home from time to time, he would turn into a black superhero. He did not know he turned into a black superhero. The black superhero didn't know that he was actually a white racist. Each had girlfriends that would witness the transformation and apparently never say anything to their boyfriend. And I'm sorry, if I'm in a relationship and somebody suddenly makes that drastic a change in front of me, I'm probably going to ask a question or two.
Yeah, right.
In each of these two stories, and this was basically a ill-considered take on Godfrey Cambridge's The Watermelon Man, the movie in which a white racist turns into a black man and ends up becoming a member of the Black Panther Party. In each of these two issues, as the white racist, he rescues someone who he can't see clearly and then gets all upset when he realizes he risked his life for a black person. Literally, and I apologize because this is going to offend some people, he rescues a baby in a baby carriage. And in these scripts, he literally says, "Do you mean I risked my life for a jungle bunny?"
Oh, ouch. Yeah.
DC handed me these two scripts and asked me if I would punch them up and start writing the book with the third issue. I said, no, I will not do this. And they go, why? Because these are the two most offensive comic book scripts I have ever read in my life.
I mean, even in the, this was the 70s?
Right.
Yeah, even in the 70s, that was, I mean, nowadays, that absolutely would not fly, but even in the 70s, that was bad.
Oh, no. And I told DC, you can't publish this comic book. People will come to your offices with pitchforks and torches. And they go, how could you know that? And I said, I'll be leading them.
Well, there you go.
And we fought about this for about a week or so. And finally, I boiled it down to the question of, do you want DC's first headline black superhero to be a white racist? And it finally hit them what a dumb idea this was. Mm-hmm. So I basically had a couple of weeks to create a new black superhero for them. I started with Jefferson Pierce. I know everything about Jefferson Pierce, and the superhero identity came after I created Jefferson Pierce and his background. I wanted a character who kids could relate to, and every kid knows what a teacher is. I made him an Olympic athlete because I wanted him to have the basic physical skills to be a superhero. I set him in Suicide Slum of Metropolis because I wanted to do stories in the inner cities. That's where my heart was. I grew up on the west side of Cleveland in a middle-class neighborhood, but we weren't that far removed from the poorer neighborhoods. So that was where those stories were where my heart is. Those are the stories I wanted to tell.
Okay.
And in Black Lightning, I tried to give the readers a very positive character. And for 40 years, readers have responded to this character. I go to conventions where people will come up to me almost in tears to tell me that Black Lightning was the first comic they ever bought for themselves because it was the first time they saw themselves in a comic book.
So did you get, was the feedback pretty, they're like, I guess did they think that, I guess, a non-black writer was still capturing, the atmosphere that you were wanting to convey? Or did
there
you
were no black writers in 1976
right.
when I started work on the character. Billy Graham, who was an artist who had written some stories for Creepy and Eerie, was the only black comics creator who had written comics professionally. It wasn't until later years, until we got really into the 80s, that some very fine writers like Dwayne McDuffie came into the field. There has been a little bit of flack from time to time because the online fandom. There's always people
my goodness, yeah.
who are going to look for ways to jab at you. But overall, the black readers have appreciated my work on the character.
Good.
Every year I go to the East Coast Black Age of Comics convention in Philadelphia, which is a black-centric comics convention. It's for characters of color, creators of color, fans of these characters and creators. Their guest poster looks like the Black Brady Bunch and their white friend. And this year,
all right, go ahead.
And this year, in May, they gave Lifetime Achievement Awards to myself and my good friend Don McGregor, who did such great work on the Black Panther at Marvel. So it's a community that respects writers who respect them. And I do an awful lot of research. I've worked in the inner city as a tutor and things like that. I talk to people in the inner city. I talk to churches. I talk to police officers. I talk to teachers. I do my homework to make my stories as realistic as possible within this superhero framework.
So do you think, and the reason I'm asking this is because I'm a big fan of this character, and the miniseries from the 80s is one of my favorite series, and in fact, I still have a copy. The Falcon in Marvel Comics, Falcon, his miniseries in the 80s was very much, in the inner city, and I remember even reading footnotes, like somebody gets called an Oreo, and like the editor actually put in a footnote that said, well, that means black on the outside, white on the inside. Do you think that, the Falcon would be where the Falcon is now without characters like, Black Lightning?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
Because
good.
As I said, new writers have come in. They are they understand the modern world. They're part of the modern world. And they see the potential in these characters that not everyone always did. I write Black Lightning as an inner city school teacher because, again, those are the stories I want to tell. Although in this new 6-issue series, it's more widespread over Cleveland. But yeah, I can see all sorts of black characters in all sorts of settings, and we're seeing that. We're seeing the Falcon taking over as Captain America for a time. We're seeing him as a member of the Avengers. We're seeing these characters in different roles, and that's great. That's great. I never want anybody to think that black superheroes can only tell one kind of story.
Right. And I think that's a great note to end on. We need to wrap the show. Tony, it's been a pleasure. Great stuff. Loved everything you shared, and I hope that Black Lightning goes on to have an even more successful career as a character in the years and decades to come. So I've got to do this to you. I apologize for any mental damages that occur, but at the end of every show, I do a bad joke of the week. So are you ready for the bad joke of the week?
I'm bracing myself.
Are you bracing? Okay. Why was Caesar upset with his cell phone plan?
I don't know.
He didn't like the Roman charges.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was bad, wasn't it?
You have succeeded in telling a bad joke.
Yeah, all right. Hey, thanks again for your time. This has been wonderful, and I wish you success with your comics work, that's coming in the future.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tony.
Don't act like a big shot, Hick. You just got to town. If you want to hang around with me, you better learn some manners, huh?
Then you have a responsibility no man has ever faced. You have your fear, which might become reality. And you have Godzilla, which is reality.
Listen, kid. There are two things you don't know about the Earth. One is me, and the other is Godzilla.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.